In light of the recent meeting between US President Donald Trump and South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, today we'll reflect on what this significant encounter may be remembered for in the history books. What lasting impact will it have on the relationship between the two nations? Let's now discuss the key moments from yesterday's meeting with historian Zikhona Valela. Zikhona, a very good afternoon to you and thank you so much for your time. So the highly anticipated high-stakes meeting between South Africa and the US has now come and gone. It was a working visit that was leading on all news outlets globally. How do you think firstly, how do you think South Africa fared in these engagements, especially on the face of having to dispel myths and disinformation fueled by racial narratives?
Good afternoon, Onati, and good afternoon to everybody tuned in. Just a correction on my surname, it's Valela. But on to your question, I would say that I think we've already, established that this engagement was kind of an ambush. And judging by how it unfolded in the course of that hour where the South African delegation met with the United States delegation, it was very clear that there was no intention to actually listen to any clarifications, and that it was really a reality TV stunt targeted at getting a dramatic reaction out of President Ramaphosa. So I think on one end, on one positive, I think the president handled the situation fairly well. If only certain questions could have been answered, or certain questions around the myth of white genocide could have been responded to firmly, I think we would have had a far more stronger, our conclusions around the meeting would have been a little bit more on the confidence side. But I think it's because this is a continuous, this was the first day yesterday, and I imagine that there's going to be continuous conversations. We'll see what happens in the coming days. But I think so far, the lesson for us, as we think about it from a historical perspective, is history will definitely judge us harshly if we remain, if we don't find ways to adequately deal with some of these lies that continue to be peddled. In a way that results in actual consequences for those who peddle such lies, because the lie of white genocide is connected to a nostalgia for apartheid, a nostalgia for the hunting of Black people in this country. So I think the more silent and the more we rest on our laurels regarding the peddling of these lies, I think we stand to be harshly judged for not actually nipping these things in the bud in terms of prosecutions and so on. I think apartheid as a crime against humanity should be treated with the sensitivity that we treat Holocaust denialism.
And unfortunately, the claims of persecutions happening in South Africa by President Trump yesterday, as some analysts indicated, also displayed a level of division among South Africans themselves. Is this also a moment, do you think, for reflection?
Absolutely. I mean, the division was very visible in the room.
Yeah.
You had somebody who, in the form of any else, who spoke to a United States that was on the side of South Africa in the war, in the border war in Angola. So that was quite a spectacular thing quite a startling thing to hear. And so it just speaks to the fact that there are sections of society, of white society in particular, who still hold very problematic views about our past and present, I would say, because I think they also went on to talk to and sort of reinforce this idea of farm killings without actually thinking about the reality of crime in this country and the ways that it affects us all, which is why one must appreciate Zingiswalos's interventions around crime, around the ways it affects, for instance, Black women. But yeah, I don't think that regardless of whatever, even if it had been done correctly, regardless, you have a president of the United States who is very obstinate in his view, and continues to sort of push this idea of this myth. What that means in terms of his agenda is yet to be seen. But I think for us as a country, it's important for us to really, those of us who are freedom loving and those who appreciate the sacrifices of many people who didn't even get a chance to see this new dispensation. It's important for us to close rank in terms of protecting the history and to also dispelling these myths and these lies that are peddled.
And I want to talk about the significance then of the South African, delegation. When you obviously look at the fact that yesterday's meeting was a culmination of a number of events, since President Trump took office in his second term in January, from the executive orders he imposed, the aid cuts, and also now, as we are discussing, this false narrative. I mean, how significant is that delegation in the room to try then, as we've seen, as you've indicated, Losi, and also we've seen one or two others, try and dispel that notion? How important do you think it was for President Cyril Ramaphosa to bring all those individuals into that room?
I think really you can tell that it's quite a strategic move to involve some of the people that, have personal relationships with the President of the United States, and also quite strategic to also create space for the white men to speak for themselves. I mean, if white genocide is a thing, why are they there? Is really the message that the President of South Africa is sort of communicating with that. But we also must be very clear, the overall agenda on their part, particularly the business people, be it Mr. Rupert, be it Mr. Else, they are there for their interests. We've seen this before historically with delegations of business people that went to meet with the ANC in exile. It was concerned with the bottom line and ensuring that business interests are protected in the case of regime change. So what we have here are people who are, I don't remember them particularly being loud about dispelling the myths of white genocide before this moment. And so now that there is a potential for sanctions, now that there is a potential situation that will see their pockets hurt, they are now responding and sort of working towards dispelling the myth in some ways. So what we're seeing here is definitely an agenda that is governed by the bottom line, and at least on their part. But I think as collectively as a nation, I think it's an opportunity for us to take advantage of the dispelling of the myths, of white privilege dispelling the myth itself, in order to reinforce the fact that this is nothing more than a myth, nothing more than a lie aimed at trying to achieve some kind of, I don't even know how it would even work considering the Constitution, but there's clearly a desire for a nostalgia for an unequal system.
Would have loved to know what you think about this almost redefinition of what genocide means for U.S. President Donald Trump. But unfortunately, we have run out of time. Thank you so much, Zikhona, for your time. Historian Zikhona Valela there for us, of course, continuing to reflect on yesterday's meeting between South Africa and the U.S.